I'm Jen, and this is Prague, the heart of Europe and my adopted home. Subscribe to get an American's take on this enchanting city and all things Czech. Welcome to the adventure. Ahoy všichni. I hope you're all feeling healthy today. That's kind of an odd greeting. It's not something we normally say, but I feel like these days it seems like an appropriate theme. So last year, even though I didn't have the flu and I didn't have any kind of virus, thankfully, I've been feeling really unhealthy. I've been sitting around, I haven't been out exercising, and I've been eating total crap. So health is really on my mind right now. So a few months ago, I made another video about healthcare differences between the Czech Republic and the United States. Some differences that I found to be kind of shocking. But in this video, I want to explore some differences in the everyday habits of the people who live in the Czech Republic versus the United States. Now, disclaimer, and I always have to say this, I'm from Los Angeles and I live in Prague. Those are two big cities and they're not necessarily representative of the countries, but that's where I've lived, and so those are the comparisons that I'm making. And at the end, I'll share some of my personal opinions about how healthy I was living in Los Angeles versus Prague. First habit, drinking alcohol. It's no surprise that Czechs rank as some of the wettest people on the planet. Thanks to their reputation for creating the original Pilsner beer, many Czechs actually consider beer to be something healthy to consume. In fact, every year, the Czechs drink 191.8 liters of beer per person. That's every man, woman, and child in this country. Presumably, the children are drinking the males. Americans drink only 73.5 liters of beer per person. And that's probably because we have to wait an additional 3 years to legally take our first sip of alcohol, which of course we all do. In the Czech Republic, the legal drinking age is 18, but it's not uncommon for teenagers as young as 15 to indulge. In fact, 1/3 of all Czech 15-year-olds have been drunk at least twice in their lives. 15-year-olds. For comparison, and I'm a total prude, but the first sip of alcohol I had, I was 18 years old. As far as teenage drunkenness in America, the US government doesn't keep statistics about things they don't want to know. See gun violence. But beer isn't everything. Czechs also love to drink Moravian wine and slivovice and other drinks. When looking at units of pure alcohol consumption, the Czechs still lead the Americans by consuming 11.9 liters per year, and Americans consume 8.8 liters per year. In America, there has long been a taboo about alcohol consumption being immoral and leading to the decay of society. And from 1920 to 1933, there was even a constitutional ban on all alcoholic beverages. And no one had a sip. Not a soul. One thing I definitely noticed when I moved to Czechia was that smoking was a lot more acceptable than in California. You could even smoke in restaurants in Prague until a few years ago. After years and years of debate, the government finally banned smoking in restaurants in 2017. But 18% of Czechs still report smoking daily. Now, like I said, I'm from California, and that has been called the non-smoking section of the United States. Smoking has been banned in bars and restaurants since 1995, a full 22 years before the Czech ban. The city where I went to high school has the strictest smoking laws in the country and forbids smoking in all indoor and outdoor public spaces, like parks and outdoor shopping malls, even parking lots. They've kept a few designated smoking places in public where the smokers can gather and be mocked and ridiculed by the rest of the public. I smoked cigarettes in my 20s and I was scorned and shamed not only by my family and my friends, but by strangers just walking by, telling me I was gonna get lung cancer or emphysema, or even worse, premature wrinkles. Los Angeles. It was actually only out of pure shame and embarrassment that I quit smoking. Only 11% of Americans claim to be smokers, although I think that number is probably a lot less in California because people would rather be labeled as a serial killer than a smoker. When I moved to Prague, it was very easy to slip back into being a casual smoker because it's a lot more acceptable here and people aren't lecturing you. People don't really tell you that they mind you smoking. Maybe they did and I just didn't understand the Czech. I personally think that peer pressure to stop smoking is a good thing because even though I smoked, I really hated being a smoker. Even though talking about them right now makes me want one. Now in Prague, you're not allowed to smoke at metro stops or tram stops, even bus stops, any sort of space that's designated where people have to gather. But you still see a lot more smokers on the street. In California, you don't really see smokers anywhere. Just as Czechs tend to believe that beer goes in the category of health drink, they also believe in a dietary foundation of colorful and nutritious vegetables. See? It's a vegetable. Yes, you'll find a lot of potatoes and you'll find a lot of cabbage, but other than that, you're not gonna find a lot of vegetable options on a Czech dinner plate. At least not when compared with California. But California has a cornucopia of vegetables that grows in the state, so we just have a lot more access to a variation of fruits and vegetables, and so they become desired by consumers. So the menus in California are constantly being updated with what's fresh, what's seasonal, and frankly, things that don't grow in the Czech Republic. Artichokes, avocados, different things like that. Meat is definitely the focus of a Czech meal. Now, I'm not a dietitian and I don't want to fight with you in the comments, but there are studies to show that excessive meat consumption can lead to various types of cancer. So I'm just gonna say that a plate filled with more vegetables and more fruit is better than a plate filled with more meat. But to be fair, the lack of vegetable variety is not the only indicator of healthy diets. From my personal observations, Czechs eat a lot less packaged food. That's one of the things I notice when I go back to the States. The entire center of this supermarket is filled with prepackaged goods. I mean, if everything in your basket is in a plastic or a saran wrap container, it's not as healthy as buying fresh meat, fresh fish, or vegetables, something like that. And Czechs, I think, sit down and have like a more rounded meal, whereas I think a lot of Americans are eating a lot of prepackaged foods, and we all know that that's not healthy. Another thing is Czechs sit and enjoy a full meal. So that was something that I noticed when I would work with Czechs. They would take the time and sit down and have either a full lunch or they'd go out for a full lunch, whereas I never did that in the United States. I'd have like a protein bar or something on the run, or maybe I wouldn't even eat it all. So these habits that the Czechs have, I feel, are more healthy than sort of this eating on the go culture in the United States. In fact, my husband was with one of our Czech friends the other day and he was driving a manual transmission and they had just gone to McDonald's and he had a cup and a hamburger and he was still managing to drive, and his Czech friend was like, how do you do that? And my husband was like, this is how you drive. I mean, you just learn to eat on the go in the United States, and that's just not as healthy as what the Czechs do, sitting down and enjoying a full meal from start to finish and then going back to work or going to sleep. It was also really fascinating for me to see very slender women enjoying a full meal at a restaurant, like dumplings, svičková, sauces. Like you would never, women in Los Angeles don't eat. I mean, this is not true of the rest of the United States. It's a very specific type of women. Everyone is always on a diet. It's like, I can't remember a time I was not on a diet in Los Angeles. There's always like a cleanse, or people aren't eating protein one week and the next week they're only eating protein, or no fat or high fat. And people are kind of obsessed with diet and nutrition, and yet everybody's always trying to lose weight. And when I look at the Czechs, mainly the women, they're very slender and they're very fit, and they're not gym rats like we are in Los Angeles. They're just kind of like naturally thin, and you see them eating real food. You see them eating real meals. You see them drinking like a half liter of beer, and they're not counting calories. So we're doing something wrong in Los Angeles. I don't know exactly what it is, but all of the focus on health makes us a little crazy. And maybe the Czech sort of moderate lifestyle is a little healthier with regard to diet. Which brings me to obesity. Oh, America, you know where this is going. So in the statistics I've found, being overweight or being obese is measured in body mass index. And I'll put the numbers here, I can't remember them off the top of my head. In these statistics, the Czechs do a lot better than the Americans do. Of course, one's weight is not only about what they're consuming, but also about their activities. And here I've gotta say that the American car culture, depending where you are, but unless you're in a very dense city, you probably have to rely on your car to get from your home to anywhere else. And I feel like this is really to blame. When I lived in Los Angeles, I never walked more than 3 kilometers, and that was like if my car broke down. And here in Prague, it's not uncommon for me to walk 8 to 10 kilometers in a day just to do errands, or when I was teaching at a school, just to walk into the center to teach, or just being on my feet at work. I'm sure cities in America with good public transportation, like New York or Chicago, have a similar situation to Prague, but in Los Angeles, that's definitely not possible. Okay, so these are some of the habits that I focused on comparing how my life had changed in the United States and in Czechia, and here is my personal feeling about them. First, drinking. I definitely drink more in the Czech Republic than I did in the United States, probably because beer is cheaper. Alcohol in the United States is pretty expensive. It's kind of built into your social life. Instead of like drinking a lot because you're at a bar or something like that, like here you sit down at a pub and you kind of just drink a beer over the course of a conversation. So it's maybe a little bit healthier. I don't know. I definitely drink more in the Czech Republic though. Smoking is bad. And I smoke less here. A lot of that has to do with the fact that my lovely husband won't put up with it, for which I'm thankful. But I think that the peer pressure in the United States, while annoying when people are constantly telling you what you should and shouldn't be doing, I shouldn't be smoking. And so that peer pressure in the United States was good, although I did a lot of it there. Fruit and vegetable consumption. I find it hard to find the variety that I like to eat of certain vegetables. I end up on like a broccoli Brussels sprouts diet in the Czech Republic because that's kind of like what I can find. But one thing that I like about the Czech Republic is that there's a lot of access to farmers markets. So while I might not have the variety, I'm constantly out in the markets getting something that's fresh, and so I probably eat it more frequently, if not the variety that I'd like. Another thing is that I don't eat really meat. And as I mentioned, in Czechia, meat is very prevalent. When you're at a restaurant, there's probably gonna be, only one dish that doesn't include meat. I like to eat fish though, and so there's always a few fish dishes, but it just doesn't have the options that you have in California. I mean, California is everyone's doing some sort of vegan, vegetarian thing. So there's more options for that there. Now, speaking of obesity, I've never been obese. I've been chunky, but when I moved to the Czech Republic, I immediately dropped 10 pounds. And I don't think it was because I was eating better, it was because I was walking all the time. So there's something about having wonderful public transportation, it's kind of counterintuitive, which makes you walk more because you can rely on there to be tram stops and metro stops, and you don't have to ever think about having a car in Prague, not the rest of the Czech Republic, but in Prague. And so I was walking so much more, and so I actually did lose weight when I moved to the Czech Republic. So in a lot of these categories, I realize it seems like the lifestyle in Los Angeles is healthier. Vegetables, no smoking, drinking less, blah, blah, blah. But then I look at my own life and I think I really wasn't as healthy then as I am now. And I think the one factor is work-life balance. And I'm not just talking about stress. I worked so much and I never took a vacation, and I've talked about it in various videos I'll link to here. And I worked really, really long hours and I didn't take a lunch break. So I had a diet that consisted of Diet Coke and cigarettes. and I always had a headache, and I was always kind of on a diet and really hungry, and there was just like a lot of pressure. There was no time to sort of sit down and have a meal. There was, you wouldn't sit at a pub and enjoy a beer. You'd kind of like go out and have a shot. And maybe that's the difference in me being that age then and this age now. That's possible. But I do feel like the lack of work-life balance is what gave me the bad habits. So even though you can find all these fabulous vegetables, I didn't have time to prepare them, so I just have a cigarette instead. So personally, I feel like I'm healthier, my habits are healthier in the Czech Republic. I could probably do with drinking a little less. These are all government statistics, but I really think that it just depends on the person. And for me personally, I feel like I'm living a much healthier life here than I was in California. These are just because of my own personal life choices. So if you've ever lived in another country and you've noticed that your health habits totally changed from living in your home country, let me know in the comments below. I'm really interested. Tak, uvidíme se příští týden. Ahoj.